Council, take your seats. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, March 28th, 2018 special meeting of the Brook Park City Council. Notice was sent out to council members Stem, Mancini, Orcutt, Scott, Bergio, Poindexter, Salvatore, Council President Vecchio, Mayor Gabella, Law Director Horvath, and Finance Director Single. Michelle, please call the roll.
Scott.
Here.
Bergio.
Here.
Orcutt.
Here.
Stem.
Here.
Mancini.
Here.
Poindexter.
Here.
Salvatore.
Here.
If everyone would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on tonight's agenda is remarks from the audience on any subject matter on this agenda only. The only thing that we have is the ordinance to provide for the appropriations of the city of Brook Park, which is the budget. If you would like to come up to the podium, anybody to speak on it, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thomas J. Coyne Jr., 23589 Woodhill Drive, Brook Park, Ohio, 44142. I visited you recently, and I didn't think I'd be back so soon, but, you know, sometimes it's warranted. I watched the last council meeting and saw council get a lecture, so to speak, about how you should enact something and it has to be done right away. And I can remember the criticism of those days. But I'm here to address a couple things, and specifically, I'm not going to get into you about your walkway. I suppose that's a foregone conclusion, but maybe after I talk, you might reconsider that as well. I left a report for the mayor. It was done by Maroos Brothers about the rec center, and I believe council, if you don't have this, you should have it. If you go through there, it clearly addresses what the issues are with the pool. And you can see that the numbers that I gave to you and the citizens of the community are damn near right on. But what's important, what's not in this budget or addressed, probably the most important thing in this review, is the masonry issues with the whole building. The tuck pointing, the brickwork that has to be replaced. And while that issue shouldn't be addressed now until the total issue of the pool is done, because it's evident to everybody that the roof has to come off. But there's about $130,000 worth of tuck pointing here that relates to the gym and the cafeteria and those other areas. I suggest before council finally enacts their capital budget, they take a real strong look at that. So that's one thing I'm asking you to do. Another issue is that how did we get here on these buildings? And I've heard Councilman Poindexter and others shouting their dismay, not shouting, but voicing their dismay over this project. This project was not a comprehensive, all-inclusive improvement of the rec center. It was mandated by need. These buildings were failing. The rec center HVAC system, most of that project is on the roof. Why? You remember the pictures with the oscillating lawn sprinkler keeping the systems going. That's what was done there. So our choice was, the one thing the mayor said correctly, it takes 3 buildings and puts them into one, because it was necessary. And let me tell you why. In 2011, this city got a grant of $185,000 to improve the boiler systems in the city. Decision was made to put in new windows. The boiler systems were never fixed. You could see the continuing ongoing issues with failings. So analyzing that cost to make improvements here, to make it efficient, and to make it effective, and the rec center, it was a case of either we open one or close the other. And the issue to the pool, if people remember at that time, we actually laid off policemen and firemen. I'm glad to see the chiefs were here because they were fighting for that. So the choice was, do we hire lifeguards or pay the waste of energy going out through the roof of the pool, or do we put gasoline in our police cars and keep police and firemen working? So it's under that umbrella that we made the decisions on the recreation center. It wasn't to get new Formica. It wasn't to do anything else except that particular issue. There was also a decision made some years ago to tear down our concession and toilet facilities at Kennedy Field. And if council has any priorities, I'm hearing about this hoax that seniors and youth are going to be threatened by a window for citizens to pay tickets. At least council ought to consider finding some way to get the toilet facilities back at Kennedy Park. I would think that that is a priority, and Randy Gardner is back here again, probably the most knowledgeable guy. Maybe he can find the sewer line and at least get toilets out at that facility. I think that should be a priority for recreation. Everything else in that building, I believe, should be held on to until such a time as we see how it functions. Mr. Chairman, I got to put give a little heads up and an acknowledgement to Councilman Mancini. He said it best. We went through this in 1998 with this building. The same thing, a massive renovation of the building rather than destroying it and rebuilding it. That's what we should have did. I don't see in the near future that you're going to be able to afford to buy a new rec center. I think I prefaced my comments the first time I was here is, wait till you get your budget. How you feel about it? Everybody feel real comfortable about the budget you got? I think not. You've got some very, very tough work to do. Finally, I want to address the most important issue to me. Your capital issues, as you see, is going to be a challenge to you, and I'm sure you'll make the right decisions, but I don't think everybody in this community wants to see their roads being fixed. At the last meeting I watched on television, that's why I'm really here. I guess this other stuff is redundant, but why I'm really here is the folks on the west end of the city. For better or for worse, I made a decision, not supported by any other elected official in this city at the time, to make an agreement with the city of Cleveland that was passed by the people of this community at a vote. And they made a determination that this city should enter into that agreement. And the fruits of that agreement today, you look at this budget and subtract $6 million from it. Subtract $6 million from your budget and see what you're facing today. Part of the provision of that was that folks in different zones would eventually at least have the opportunity to be proffered an offer for their property. That was denied folks in a couple of zones in the city. It was done not by councilmanic action, not a vote of the people. It was done by a memorandum of understanding. And I'm not here to castigate any problems for anybody. I'm here to advocate for these people who were left behind before. This council must not leave them behind again. It would be intolerable for these people. I believe that the law department with special counsel is in a great position to make these people whole for what happened to them over these years. And this document that was discovered, and I believe that you all have it, and if you don't, I'll make sure that you get it, was done under discovery of the city of Cleveland. It didn't exist any place in any records of this community. So I'm asking you this evening, no matter what else you do in this budget, do not move the resources necessary to protect those people. Give the law director the ammunition that she needs, and the success will be there, and I'm sure that later on in this year, if it's not impeded by anybody, that you won't have to worry about that $200,000, and you'll get whatever money you've expended so far, and it hasn't been that much. So that, to me, is the most important thing in enacting this budget, and that's why I'm primarily here this evening. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. Good luck, and if I can help any members of council with any information on this budget, I'll be very happy to talk to them about it. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Coyne. Seeing no one else coming to the podium, we will move on. Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 11,017-2018, introduced by Mayor Camella, to provide for the appropriations of the City of Brook Park, State of Ohio, for fiscal year ending December 31, 2018.
Floor is open for discussion, gentlemen. Mr. Mancini.
To the chair, to the council president, if we could we have the police chief come up to the microphone for a couple questions? Is that fine?
Well, you're asking, we'd like to start with the police chief and start. Perfect.
Thank you.
Chief Foster, if you'd like to come to the podium. State your name and your and address, please.
James Foster, Chief of Police, Brook Park, 17401 Holland Road, Brook Park, Ohio.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, again, I mean, thank you and the men for everything you do. I know, as with any police force, we have our hands full, and it's a 24/7, and, you know, I think you guys do a terrific job, as well as all our safety services, and you guys do a terrific job over there. And I know you know that our budget's, we have a tight budget. It's been spoken many a time, and, you know, we're looking to do things that we can do. There's a lot of things that we can't do that we'd like to do. So if I could just go over a couple of things on the budget funding list that is put down from the police department. If you could just give us a brief, little summary what you think, and that will be fine, okay? But if you could maybe, if it's okay, you know, if you want to give us a rundown on the department, on the status of it now, is that okay? I mean,
Sure. Interrupt me if I'm going the wrong direction
Go
or whatever
ahead.
you want, but I appreciate being invited to council, and say hi to all elected officials, directors, and Michelle and Ed. You two up
Everybody
there.
say hi to the chief.
And so currently we have 36 members of the police department. 3 are going to be retiring early next year, January, myself being included with that.
we're 36, and I mean to interrupt, but one real quick, if I could. 36 now, is there anybody off or anything now? Or we're 36 as it stands today?
36 today. Currently, we have 2 on extended sick leave, 1 on bereavement, and a couple in training. But I mean, other than that, we expect everyone to be coming back. You know, it's just a matter of time when the doctors clear the 2 that are off on sick. But other than that, I mean, as far as our auxiliary unit, I just had a meeting with the executive officer of the auxiliaries. We used to always have 20 or more auxiliaries in the city. We did a recruitment last year at the safety fair. Unfortunately, we didn't get any new auxiliary officers for the city, but we're going to be down to 9 auxiliary officers come next month because 2 are resigning for health reasons. And, the auxiliaries are an important unit. They are a volunteer unit. They do supplement issues. We had an OVI drunk accident last night that took down a power line on Smith Road in Sylvia about 1:30 last night. It didn't open up till about 9 o'clock. Auxiliaries came in, and they handled that so the officers could be free to answer the calls, and it didn't tie them up all night because the electrical lines were down. That's just one example, just the most recent. But with 9, that doesn't mean that they're always available. I mean, they hold jobs, they have responsibilities. It's just a voluntary commitment. So we're in need of them tomorrow. President Trump's coming into town. When the president comes in, all the law enforcement in the area are involved with it. All the roads to the airport come through Brook Park. So we're always, no matter who it is, with the president, it's a total shutdown. For the first time, tomorrow I won't have enough officers to man our post. So I had to have request assistance from Cleveland to man 4 of them. So things are tight. Things are, in my career, they've never been tighter. So it is important that we don't go any lower than we are, in my opinion. If it happens, we'll make the best of it. We'll do whatever we need to do. But it is a thin line. We border city of Cleveland. We have 3,500 employees at NASA, plus all the visitors. So if there's an issue, the way it's going to be fixed is, through manpower or police officers. So I don't know if that's what you're asking for, or whatever, as far as the police department.
No, I thought that was fantastic. I think you kind of gave us an outlook and an observation that, we all kind of felt, and we know you're short. And I would have to say the police department's probably one place we definitely don't want to be short. You know, I think at the one point you were, if I'm not mistaken, you were at 44.
44 was the number we had for a pretty good long time, but since probably in the last 10 years or so, we've just gradually gone down. We haven't replaced officers as far as getting the number up. So like I said, we gradually through attrition went down to 36.
Okay, and if I can, one more before we get to this budget. We did have, I believe you guys call it, is it a code red, where when we had the incident on Richard, we had the incident on the West End, that, you know, you had to call people in. Is that when things like that happen, is it become a big problem over at the station when you're short staff like?
Well, situations like that are prepared for through our regional agreements. We have SEB, Southwest Enforcement Bureau, where there are basically SWAT teams, bomb teams, hostage negotiator. They have a command post, armored vehicle. So usually when there's an incident like that, we call in the SEB, and within an hour they're on post.
Okay,
So
and I thought, to wrap that up, I thought they did a terrific job that night. As in most nights when things happen, but on that night, I thought they did a terrific job.
And I'll just make a note. I know there was a couple issues that night, and I know I saw you that night there, and we were able to talk, and there was a lot of rumors that were going around. And, you know, most of them weren't true. They were maybe partially true, and I do appreciate, you know, yourself. I explained what's going on, and I know you got the word out to the community one by one, telling them, you know, it wasn't
Chief-
as bad as they thought it was.
Chief, you did a great job that night, but I always think you do, so.
Thank you.
Okay, on to a few questions if we could. In front of you, do you have the budget funding requested?
I do. I have my original and a revised.
Okay. I believe what I'm looking at, I believe it's the original.
Yeah, what we have is the original, so whatever Chief's gonna have, I mean, we probably, in this case, wanna go down what we have here and let him tell us what has been changed.
Okay, we'll make it really quick, Chief.
Sure.
Okay, the bulletproof vest replacement, has that been accomplished yet, or is that still on the table, or?
I believe that, I'm told that's going to be funded this year. It is a contract. It's in the contract for the police officers. Also not mentioned in there is that there is a state program that reimburses us approximately 80% of that. So
Okay.
we go by the vest, the bulletproof vest warranty. Unfortunately, they only warranty them for 5 years. So after 5 years, they're not considered good anymore. So we replace them every 5 years. So there's 8 officers are going to receive them this year. We'll submit the bills to this program, and it's basically a grant program. And depending on the funding for the year, we'll get about 80% of that back. So we should get over $6,000 back, which generally I have just put it back in the general fund. I guess I could make an issue of it and say it's really my capital, but I've never done that.
On the 7 police vehicles, where will we stand on that?
We revised that to 5. I talked to John Pensis from the service department. He knows the vehicle is the best. 7, I was hoping to get 7, but 5 will be sufficient for the police department for this year.
Well, in the best of all worlds, I know them things run 24/7, and I know they take a lot of beating. Might not seem like it, but they do a lot of, sitting too, which does a car just as bad sometimes as driving. But now that is at 5. Okay, I appreciate that. And that would be the Ford Explorers, or would it be the Taurus, or?
Right now, we're looking at 3 Ford Explorers, which will replace the marked units, the first responding vehicles, and then 1 Ford Taurus, which will be marked for a traffic enforcement car. The Tauruses and things and Explorers, we've gone to wrapping the vehicles instead of painting them. It's actually cheaper to get the car that's black than put the wrap on it, and then it saves the city money. And then when we get them, when we feel that they enter the life for the police department, they take the wrap off. It actually benefits the look of the vehicle. It has a nice shine to it still, almost original, because it actually protects it. And if we get them up early enough, we can repurpose them for the city. The building department has them. I think the service department may have some now. And like I said, not that they're bad vehicles, but police first respond vehicles, they're become a second-rate vehicle. But for normal driving in the city, they're perfectly fine, and they should have an extended life. I would assume at least 5 years. So if we get them early enough, they can have a second life in the city.
Okay, very, very good point. On the building and jail surveillance camera system, how are we on that?
I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get that this year.
Okay,
Because of the funding, I may have to, cut that. We're just going to have to see what the vehicles come through, and we'll see what we can come up with on that.
okay. The outside vest carrier?
Outside vest carrier, again, things change in every occupation and profession. What's happening is there's so much gear on the police officers' belts anymore that they can't put it all on their belts. And plus, it is actually causing, through the studies, back problems with the officers. We have one officer who actually has some back problems, and it's attributed to his belt. So the outer vest carriers are actually carriers that hold a bulletproof vest. They do come off. Normally, they're underneath the shirt, but it helps officers when they want to cool down around station or they don't need it. They can take it off, and it does cool them, especially in the summer. But it also carries their gear and their extra gear on the outside. So that's something that we've never had before. They weren't really available up until about 5 years, and they've become a lot better. Some of them look very, in my opinion, too tactical, too much like a SWAT officer. Like I said, they have really been refined. They match the uniform material, and they're blended in. So I'm thinking about going to them for the health and safety and better performance from the officers. And that's one of the reasons it's going to be coming out of the LE fund. It will not be out of the general fund for that, because that's something that's above and beyond and extra. That's something that we've never had before.
Okay,
Gentlemen, why don't we, let's break this down into sections. Let's stop right there. Let's let anybody else ask questions on the same one, so we're not have to go back through.
we've discussed as a council that I will handle this part right here. So I'm gonna finish up here with these I got 5 more right here, and these go to the building itself. So we had discussed it. I'd handle the police chief, so.
I wasn't made aware of that, so
All right,
thank you.
thank you. All right, if we could go back to the building, which I actually think I'd love to see get 10 more officers in a new building, but that's being bold. But the records room renovations at 25.
I'm really hoping to get that this year. The records room is the dispatch room. The building was built in 1970. It's been remodeled once. So in 38 years, that's still the second carpet that's been laid down there. The ceiling tiles, they used to be able to smoke in that room, so the ceiling tiles are discolored from that. It's just a whole routine that all the radio equipment's in there from dispatch. So I like to modernize it. When people come into the lobby, that there's a window there that they can see, and that's what they see of the police department.
Yes.
The rest of the building, they don't see. And unfortunately, I would like it. I'm not saying it looks bad, but I would like it to look the best it can, the most professional way it can look. And I think with minimal amount, that's what people are going to see when they come to the police department.
Okay, the officers' report room. 15.
Yeah, we've gone to that. We were hoping to we increased the size of their room, and we're hoping to fill that room. However, I have been told that there might be some furniture from the move from the tax department, and I'm hoping that that furniture there, that's still in good condition and things can work, over there for the officers.
Okay, the captain's office is in conference room. I've been up there.
It's
so.
pretty much, it's just need a renovation. I mean, it really hasn't been changed since the building has been made.
Here's an important one, the server replacement. There's 2.
Correct. The IT service that the city has, he recommended last year that we get the servers because they're ready to fatigue. I asked if we can stretch it out another year, and he thought we could. But this year, I just saw him yesterday, and he says, we do need those this year. So that will be one thing definitely that I plan on putting in.
All right, my colleagues have put, okay, and the detective bureau equipment at 20. And I see a half on that.
Yeah, it varies from year to year. Right now, I'm not positive what we're looking for, but whatever it is, we will, the LE fund, we will match whatever the city capital we have.
Okay, good to hear. And I'm going to finish up on this. The appropriated 234 for the overtime, is that sufficient? I mean, being where you are on the number of officers and.
I'm going to do everything I can to keep that number.
I know you do.
But you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it did increase some. Again, one injury or something, or if, you know, somebody decides to retire earlier than later for any number of reasons, you know, that would cause, there's a high chance that it would start to cause overtime. Every officer that's not available under 36.
Okay, Chief, I appreciate, your answers. I thought you were right to the table on it, and I appreciate it. I'm gonna let some of my other colleagues, I know some of them have some questions, but I thank you, and I thank all the men over there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilman Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief, for being in attendance this evening. Some of my questions were answered due to the questions presented by Councilman Mancini. But I just wanted for clarification, that this budget funding request from February 3rd, this was what you were requesting, as you stated to Councilman Mancini and the rest of council. And you were looking for 7 vehicles, which at $260,000, which is now reduced to 5, correct?
Correct.
And then you said there was going to be 3 Ford Explorers and 1 Ford Taurus. That's 4 vehicles. What's the other vehicle?
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. I'm looking for one Ford F-150.
So there will be 1. That would be reduced from 2 to 1.
Yes.
And that was $260,000. Now, I'm assuming that's for purchase, correct? This isn't going to be a lease, is it?
Well, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Finance Director, but we do a 3-year lease, so the payments are spread out 3 years, and then when the lease is completed, the city of Brook Park owns those vehicles.
Okay, so can we get a breakdown? I guess I'm going to direct my questions at the same time to the Finance Director and to you, so that maybe you can start penciling in some answers when we're finished with the presentation from the directors. But what will that number be now, if you know?
I mean, as far as the payment, it would be 1/3 of the cost.
Through the chair to Councilman Salter, we have budgeted in $58,000 to lease the vehicles.
58,000 for the lease agreements?
58, yeah.
For the 5 vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, well, you were looking for 260, you got 58, congratulations. As far as the vests, I think that's obviously that's needed no matter what. I mean, that's a contract. They will only have a 5-year guarantee. I personally would like to see them replaced earlier than 5 years. I wouldn't want to take any chances and say, oops, it only lasted 4 years and 9 months. So if we did it a little early, it would be okay with me. But now with the grant program under contract, do we have to pay for it first?
Yes.
And then get reimbursed?
I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay.
we have to pay for it and then show that we paid for it, then submit the receipt that we paid it back, and then they'll reimburse us.
Because I agree with you, and if you take the time to figure out how to get a grant for that amount for such an important purpose, it really shouldn't be reflected in the budget, but I understand we have to pay for it first, and then when that money gets returned, we can put it somewhere to good use, but, so that's a good thing. You did touch on the records room, and I know that that's important to have a place to store records. But I guess my question would be to simplify it, if the finance director can tell us of all the things that you've requested, what actually hit the budget? So when we're looking at this, the funding request, what was the final decision made that we actually are on the budget that we are going to be talking about and voting upon?
Mr. Chairman, through the chair to Councilman Salter, do you all have a copy of, it's City of Brook Park proposed capital improvement expenditures? I know I submitted this over to, I believe, Council President Vecchio and Councilman Scott. So I have a listing for the police department, building improvements, 50,000.
Oh, hold on a second. If you have that, I don't have that, so if I could get a copy of that, I can follow along.
I think you passed this out.
I guess I can ask a few more questions while we're waiting for that copy.
I got it.
I'm disappointed to find that we had 20 auxiliaries and we're down to 9. I mean, I know they play a major role and they do an excellent job. Going back to when I was a kid, the auxiliaries played a major role in Brook Park. What process is used for recruitment? And then why are we having such a problem filling those spots?
It's probably a combination of reasons. Yeah, I think a lot of volunteer organizations in general have, just can't, it's harder to find volunteers. The other thing is, I don't know if people are not as interested in law enforcement. What I mean is at one time, for the police examination for patrol officer, there was 800 people that applied, and we needed the IX center to take the exam, and that was about just over 20 years ago. Now, I think this last exam in 2017, I believe we had 36 people apply to take the test. So, I mean, from 800 to 36, and I think that it's just a general trend that's taking place in our area right now. And I don't know the exact reason, but the numbers keep showing it going down, down, down.
And I can move on to, I'm going to take a break and read over this report I just received here, but in the overtime, the 234,000, you have already, I'm sure, taken into consideration the situation where we have a couple of guys out on medical leaves and the bereavements. All that is incorporated into the 234, I would assume. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, we're always going to have somebody on, sick time here or there and things, that it does happen. This year, just right in, end of January, we just happen to have it right off the beginning. Hopefully it doesn't, cause a problem. It's been calculated, and generally we've increased it 2%. I believe that was the pay raise increase, so we roughly 2%, a little bit more, just to incorporate it. But we'll monitor it, and if for some reason we get people that go out for any reason, we may have to go to adjustment on that.
And I'm sure you've taken the time, as efficient as you are, that by adding 1 or 2 additional police officers, what effect would that have on the overtime? And have you looked at that?
I really haven't studied it one per one, but I know it will decrease, the overtime, because, well, let me go back. The overtime is made up of a couple things. It's made up of court appearances. The night shift generally has, and always has, in our department and most departments, it seems like that's where most arrests take place, in the afternoon and early morning hours. Now, the court appearances are during the day. So anytime there's a court appearance, those officers are in on overtime. Because when they're done, then they got to go back to their shift at night. So, that's an overtime. Some of the training, more and more of the training now, I have to pay overtime for them to go. We've to a point where, we can only adjust the officers' hours so much. We have 4 8-hour trainings a year that they voluntarily, or they've agreed to change, and that's, the 32 hours of training they get. The state has required 40 hours of training this year, and plus some additional training, our rapid response drills and some of the other tactics that we train in. We'll do that in addition to what's required. So there's more and more demands in every direction, and just some of it has to be overtime for the training.
That was the reason why I asked that question, because I knew you would give a good explanation. I think it's important that everybody understands there's certain criteria that's going to apply on overtime. It doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to change it. And one of them is court appearances. And I think you brought up a real important point there. So it's going to be very difficult to cut into that and to eliminate it, because some of it just goes with the territory. It's going to be there. But I will yield the rest of my questions and let the other members of council ask theirs while I look over the proposed capital improvement expenditure for 2018. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Scott.
No, you answered the question.
Mr. Stem.
Thank you, Council President. Through the chair to the chief, thank you for coming. And then I think it's important to stress that with the state mandates with training for police officers, that it's important that they have to complete a certain number of hours each year, or their commission could be suspended. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's relatively new. There was never a requirement up until about 6 years ago.
And they keep adding more and more training throughout the year, so council, it's very important that they get this training done within the fiscal year or the calendar year, so they don't lose their commission and they're able to work still. Thank you, Chief and Council President.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question. Chief, you can just stand there for this one. This is going to go to Mr. Single. Mr. Single, on the sheet, the proposed capital improvements expenditures that you just handed out to everybody, underneath police, there is vehicle lease of 58,000. Then 2 lines below that, there are leases for 102,663. What are those leases?
So currently, we have, Mr. Chairman, we have 2 police interceptor leases, both of roughly about 46,000 each. And we have the copier lease that almost all departments have. That would be in that as well. That's about 10,000.
Copier. Great, thank you. Anyone else for questions for Chief Foster? Mr. Poindexter?
Thank you, Council President. So this proposed capital improvements expenditures sheet, is that all the capital improvement expenditures that, is that the total of them?
Yes, that's what I had put in for. Of course, after you put in for it, there's always some other things that, come across your desk or whatever. But generally, right now, this is what I had put in for 2018.
Okay. Well, with the federal forfeiture fund taking care of half of the building improvements and half of the detective bureau improvements, I come up with a total of about 220,000, and I see that that it's appropriated for 254,000. Is that? Should that?
That's a number that I've been given. Yes.
Okay. I guess my question would be to Greg then. Do you like to have that extra $30,000 of wiggle room, or would that be something that we could extract from there?
Through the chair to Councilman Poindexter, the 220,000, 70,000 of that's going to be part of the federal forfeiture fund, which is Fund 272. So half of the cost of the building improvements are budgeted at 100,000 total. 50% would come from capital, Fund 401, and 50% would come from the federal forfeiture fund.
So the half's already been taken out.
272. So we have, so for the 2018 dollars and the sheet that we just handed out, 150,000 is appropriated for the police department, plus the leases that were carried over or were entered into prior to 2018. So when you go through and add all of it together, the total amount will be 254,000 plus almost 10,000 that was carried forward from 2017. So the total proposed appropriations for the police department and the capital improvement fund would be about 265,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I must.
And then there would be other costs in the federal forfeiture.
I thought the 50,000 was the total, and then half of it was coming out of.
No,
I
that's
didn't
just the half the piece that's for the capital.
That's
piece.
what's
And
left.
there's another
Yeah, I
50,000 in the federal forfeiture fund.
Okay, then that nullifies my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Anyone else? Mr. Orcutt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief, for coming. Just one quick question. We've asked it up here for the last few weeks, and we didn't have an explanation. Fund 270, the law enforcement fund, and then Fund 272. We were wondering, what can that money be used for in detail?
And I was told that that you may want a better explanation. So I actually went to the manual, and if you don't mind, I'll just kind of read it and then I'll sum it up for you. Okay, but it is. Section B, it says that the funds can be for an increase and not replace. The funds must be used to increase or supplement the resources of the receiving local law enforcement agency or any other ultimate recipient. Shared resources shall not be used to replace or supplant the appropriate resources of the recipient. The recipient agency must benefit directly from the sharing. It is determined whether supplementation has occurred. The Department of Justice will examine the law enforcement agency's budget as a whole and allow agencies to use the funds for any permissible purpose as long as the funds increase the entire law enforcement budget. The Department of Justice may terminate the sharing with the law enforcement agency that are not permitted by the governing authorities to benefit directly from the sharing. So what it's saying is this, that the funds are been forfeited through court for drug enforcement, usually it's drug enforcement. And the courts have agreed, and legislators, that the funds should be used for law enforcement to enhance, to go over what their norm is to fight for law enforcement. So what they were seeing with it is, if the police department would get $100,000 from it, many agencies were decreasing the normal budget $100,000 and then giving some of that money to the other departments. And they said this wasn't the purpose of this law enforcement fund. This is strictly for law enforcement to benefit and go above and beyond what we're looking for. And I'll give you an example. One of the things I'm considering, the new vehicles, we just got the literature, Ford has introduced some protective glass, bullet-resistant glass for the cars. It's an addition. Again, we've never had that before. That's not a norm that we've had before. I'm considering using that money once I get the dollar amount and adding it to it. You know, it wouldn't come out of the capital of the city, but it would come out of that fund to enhance and protect law enforcement, or to be able to have them go further. So that's what the funds are for. It's not a fight over money. It's my money and not your money. I mean, the purpose of it is, and that's why they do a yearly audit, and with the assistant finance director, we go through it and we submit it to Department of Justice, and they go through it and they want our budget dollars and go through it. Again, it's really to enhance us to go further. We bought the tasers with it. We bought the AR-15s with it, things like that. But if they find out that we bought anything else with the funds because they just lowered our budget and told us to use those, then they can actually go and take all the funds back and zero their account. So that's what I try to work every year with the finance director. And we have conversations because he always wants to take the money, which good, that's good, and we have a pretty good conversation about it. But I know when it comes to push to shove, he recites it pretty well about the funds are for the law enforcement purpose. So I don't know if that explains it or if I need to reword it somehow.
That was terrific. You simplified it. That was perfect. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I had, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Salvatore.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on the bulletproof glass, which I think sounds like a great idea, will that be all the windows, just the windshield?
I'm still finding out about it, but there's a panel for the driver's side door, the glass, and also in the door itself. And when the vehicle, say we retire the vehicle, if we get another, say, Ford Explorer, that can be transferred to the next vehicle. Obviously, there's a cost to that, and that's some of the cost in transferring vehicles. You got to transfer the lights, the radios, all the equipment, and it does add up to about $3,000 to $5,000. But that's all calculated in here and things. So, but I am looking at that, and that's one of the things that we want to help the officer, have them confident and to know that we're protecting them the best we can.
Absolutely. I think it's a fabulous idea. If I may continue, Mr. Chairman, talking about that fund, from what you just read and what you explained, it sounds to me like that we may be able to use that fund to put officers in the schools. And I was wondering if you could take a look at a program that would, I wouldn't mind seeing if we used Brook Park officers that are off duty in the schools and be paid the going rate, whatever a police officer would receive if he was on duty. He could still be in full uniform and have his weapon and work off duty. Brook Park Police in our Brook Park schools. And if the other cities want to adopt that, that's fine, but I think it's something that we should look at. And I wouldn't mind having a backup guy, because sometimes maybe one may not be enough depending on what's going on. And if we can clean up a few things in there, drug-related and other issues that may be going on in our schools to provide safety and to limit the risk of anybody coming in there with a firearm, once, there's a certain thing that happens when the police get involved, they command a certain respect. And the people who want to play games are going to think twice when they see our men in blue sitting at the front door. I've seen it happen. I was instrumental in putting a program together almost 30 years ago at the airport. And we used off-duty Cleveland policemen in uniform, and it was so successful that we're still doing it today. And I would be more than glad to sit down with you, and if we can get the funds to do this, I think we can't afford not to, if there's funds available to put our police officers in our schools and solve the issue that, when we had the superintendent here talking about Berea is doing it. I think we should be the leader and find a way that we can fund this thing permanently and have the ability to protect our children. And I know how you guys are. If you get a call from one of your own saying, hey, I need you here, nothing is gonna, they'll be there, and if the record's 4 minutes, they'll be there in 19 seconds. I mean, it's really amazing how you guys stick together when there's somebody in trouble, that you're there at the drop of a hat. I see it in other departments, but also mostly here in Brook Park. I'm very impressed with the way you guys operate. So if that could be something that you could sit down and analyze it, I'd be more than glad to sit with you and show you what we did at the airport. And if he can make it work here, I'd be very, very happy to see that.
I appreciate that, and thank you. I know Mayor Gamella's office, we looked at some possible state funding grants. I've been in conversation with him about applying for it for an SRO officer. It's similar to the DARE officer. The DARE officer is under another funding. They're both out of the same grant per se, but they're separate. You know, the DARE is there to teach, and we get reimbursement based on what he teaches, what the officer teaches. The SRO obviously is there for different reasons. So we're looking at that grant. We're hopefully, I've been in contact with the other chiefs, my peers in the Berea Police Department and the Middleburg Police Department, and we're ideally, if you're asking my opinion, you know, we're hoping that, you know, all cities can reach the same agreement with one school district, so that, you know, I'm not competing with the Berea Police Department or competing with the Middleburg. You know, we just come up with one policy. Let's sit down, come up with one policy. This is the funding. 50-50 would be the number I would throw out as a starting point. And then we'll figure out, you know, how to fund it, the rest, whether it's through grant or some other funding through the police department, and then getting the right personnel as the SRO is important. But those are problems we can solve easily once the funding's in place, and especially if we're coming down to one school, it won't be as difficult.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll move on. Thanks again, Chief.
Thank you, and I appreciate a lot of the good comments I hear at some of the meetings and things. You know, I've heard nothing but support for the police department, so I just want to let you know that we do hear it, what you say at the council meeting. You know, that people do repeat it, and it's really been positive, especially this year and things. So I really appreciate it, and we'll continue to make the city proud. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
We'll move on to the Fire Department, Chief Mond next. Chief, if you come to the podium and state your name and work address for us, please.
My name is Thomas Mond, the Chief of the Fire Department of the City of Brook Park. My address is 17401 Holland Road, Brook Park, Ohio.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Scott.
Through the chair to the chief. How you doing, buddy?
Hi.
Real quick question. Again, what is your manning numbers right now, and what is your, you know, how many do you have out? You know, is there an issue with
six.
the?
Okay. My manning numbers currently, we have 30 firefighter paramedics, or 29 firefighter paramedics, 27 devoted to first response, 3 are considered administrative, and are not first response, myself, my assistant chief, and the fire inspector. So we have 27 first response paramedics throughout the whole department.
Do you have any out with?
We currently, we just got 1 of 3 back today. We've had 3 out on long-term injury.
Okay. We got your appropriation request, okay? Can you please give me a description about that station number 9 door project? What's that all about?
Well, the number 9, the door project is about moving the ladder into a first line response. We purchased the ladder back in 2002 and paid $750,000 around for that piece of equipment. And we've been unable to respond it because of our manning. We responded to other cities, and we responded to commercial buildings, fire alarms in this city. But when we do that, we drop the response of an ambulance at that time. So basically, by renovating the 1958 West End station, which is referred to as Station 9 now, we're going to bump the doors so that we can respond the ladder from that location. The hope is that we can respond the ladder to most of our commercial buildings that are greater than 3 stories high. NASA, being our biggest taxpayer, only asks for one service, and that's us. They have their own police force, they have their own service department, and they only ask for fire protection and EMS. So by putting the ladder out there, it's our biggest water resource. We can throw the most water with the ladder. We can do elevated master streams. And according to the NFPA standard 1710, they require it on a ladder to respond on all structure fires, including residential house fires. Currently, we can't respond that because the only thing that fits in that 1958 station is a pumper. One of our smaller pumpers, our 1996 pumper. So we respond that pumper, and then we respond our first line pumper, which is a 2002 from our main station, which is referred to as Station 8 on Holland Road. And we have to get our ladder from another city. So in essence, we have a $1 million piece of equipment that goes to our commercial fires, manned with only 2 people or 3, and other people's fires. And when we do that, we rob our current pumper to staff the ladder and respond to Middleburg, Berea, Parma Heights, or whatever.
Okay, again, if you don't mind. The manning right now, we have 5 at station, what?
Main station.
The main
5 at the
station.
main station and 2 at the west end.
Now, what is the procedure if a pumper is called out on the main station? How many men are on that typically on a call?
Well, typically, we try to staff it with 4, but occasionally, if the ambulance is out on a run simultaneously, it could be as low as 2, sometimes 3. We run from that station, we have several pieces of apparatus, but we don't have enough men to staff that apparatus. So we do what's called jump staffing. It's popular in this area, but it's not necessarily popular in the fire service. Jump staffing means that whatever the call comes in as, you take that vehicle for that emergency. We jump staff out at Station 9 or the West End. We have 2 men out there, an ALS ambulance, Advanced Life Support Ambulance, and we have a pumper. If we get a fire, they take the pumper. If it's an ambulance run, they take the ambulance. Here, the same thing goes. In order to provide 3 men on most EMS calls, we have what's called a chase vehicle. And that chase vehicle goes with the ambulance on most EMS runs in case it becomes a life-threatening situation where 3 paramedics are needed for, say, a resuscitation of somebody. That way, that man that goes in the chase vehicle leaves the chase vehicle at the scene and accompanies that squad. If he's not needed, he comes back in service and he comes back to man one of the remaining units at the main station. The chase vehicle is instrumental in everything that we do at the fire department, like this budget request, is about putting Band-Aids on minimum manning. Currently, we have a minimum manning that's a part of our contract with the labor union. However, I've advised the previous administration and this current administration that we cannot man 2 stations with less than 7 men and provide the service to the citizens that we are to this day. If you drop the manning any further, we will have to close apparatus that we cannot respond. Currently, we're able to handle 3 ambulance calls with 7 men, providing 3 men to probably 85% of all those ambulance calls. When we do that, we abandon our fire capabilities. It's called jump staffing. At one time, this department had 40 men on it. Today, we have 30 men, 27 that respond. One issue I saw in one of the live streaming was the overtime. Is there something we can do to manage the overtime? Well, overtime is nothing more than a shell game. If you have manning, you're going to pay more in salaries and benefits and less in overtime. If you don't have the manning, you're going to pay more in manning to keep that 7-man minimum. And like I said, even now, one Councilman Scott, I believe, mentioned that he had documentation that our overtime 1 year dropped to $76,000. That's because our minimum manning dropped, and we were consolidated into 1 station, and that was after the closure of the West End station. And when that happened, if we dropped below a 7-man minimum, we didn't replace them. And if we dropped below 6 men, we started closing our services to the citizens. That means I could not staff 3 ambulances at that point. And that happened a few times during that $76,000 overtime thing, that I would not replace them. That was a directive from the current administration at that time. Subsequently, this new administration, or the opening of the other station, forced the administration to then staff us at 7-man minimum. And I'll read that CBA that I have right here, and I can't control the CBA. I can read this section of minimum manning. As long as the city continues to operate the current number of fire stations, the employer shall maintain a schedule of not less than 7 firefighters to be on duty and to be assigned firefighting paramedic duties. And this is beyond my control. And we're at a tipping point now. In the last 5 years, we've seen our run volume increase almost 1,000 runs, and our manning steadily go down from 34 to 30. And our budget has been flat with a little bit of increase, and that's overall operations. I have all these annual reports that I would make available for all of you to read. And on there, it lists the overtime, it lists the salaries for that year, and it lists the combination of both. And and by the way, my budget is 95% salary and benefits, and it isn't capital, just so you know. But from 2017, we were at and correct me if I'm wrong, Finance Director, about $3 million, $3,054,859. And back in 2013, we were at $2,900,076,333. So what I'm trying to depict there is that even though our manning from 34 to 30 has steadily gone down because of wages and benefits negotiated by the city, the overall operating budget on wages and benefits have gone up, even though our manning has gone down. As you know, it costs money to staff a fire department. So that's all this information is available to any one of you. It's anytime you want to come over to the fire station, I can certainly address any education and how we go about fighting fire, how we are embracing modern firefighting techniques with minimum mannings that was suffering all over the country. But like I said, I've been waiting for calls, but I have only received two gentlemen that came over. Councilman Stem and Councilman Poindexter both came along and actually got to ride on a few calls with us and saw how we operate. But I'm open to any questions on our operation, our budget, and our request. The other thing is the revisiting of the capital request on the station is by allowing that $1 million apparatus to go into service full-time. The previous administration recognized that our frontline pumper is reaching 20 years old. At that point, even our mechanics have been consulted and said they're probably able to keep it afloat for maybe 2 more years. An ambulance and a fire truck is not like a normal service department vehicle. It has to respond every time. It cannot stall. If it stalls with all the equipment on it, we can't take the equipment off, put it on another truck, and get to that scene in a timely fashion. As you know, fire grows ×2 every minute it's left unchecked, so it's imperative that we get to the fire as fast as possible. So if you want to go over the capital budget, and I don't know if you have the adjusted one, but I have my wish list, and I'll explain all of that to you, and then you can ask me about what was actually whittled off and appropriated. And if you recall, the plans for this station was approved by council after the closure of Station 4, which was the one on the east end, after they did the throughway on Snow Road. This was approved by the council at the time, and this was for $124,000. I don't know if you can recognize some of the names on there from the councilman, Salvatore. I think the council president at the time was Mike Gamella. But it was for $124,000. And again, the primary reason was to bump the doors to allow modern firefighting apparatus to respond from that location. But it also included new HVAC. It included glass block windows into single pane windows that currently exist there, some modernization of a 1958 vintage heating system in the apparatus room. Some of that might need to be cut away with the increase in costs since this plan was developed. So, we would have to look at that. Even if you granted us the $150,000, we might have to cut some of that out just to get the doors opened up. And that's the primary reason we need the money, so that we can put that ladder in service.
If I may. Just to get familiarized with the process. If you have a pumper go out with 4, okay?
Say that
You have a
again?
pumper going out, you have a truck going out with 4 firefighters on it.
Okay.
Do you draw 2 from fire station 9, I guess it's now,
Well,
to replace, do they come over
well, it
to-
depends on what happens is we base it on the call. So if we have 4 going to Middleburg for a house fire where they need to supplement their staff, because remember, the NFPA requirement 1710 is 14 men on the scene of a structure fire, is single-family house structure. So that means their 6 can't do it. All their 6 will be there. Maybe 4 from Berea will be there, and then maybe 4 from our company will be there to fight one house fire in Middleburg. In that instance, there would be 1 guy left there. The Station 9 would then come over to the main house and reestablish jump staffing for the pumper, and the OIC that went to that house fire in another city would call back and say, this is the real deal, we're gonna be here a while, start calling people in. At that point, then we have an emergency call list and we call people in on overtime to backfill the fire station, to bring it up to a 7-man minimum.
So.
And that's for another house fire. Now, if we had one in our town, we're all going to that house fire. And then we're backfilling our station with, the dispatch knows to start calling the emergency call list, and we backfill any other call that happens in the city with other departments that surround us. It's called a mutual aid box alarm system.
So basically, I just want to get it straight. 4 go out, 2 come over, you put the ladder truck over in 9, then there's nobody to take it over there because you've got them 2 over here.
That's correct. Unless I drive the ladder over here and backfill the station, and then it remains outside or whatever until the other. There's still a possibility that the ladder could come over with those 2 men and still be ready to respond with 3 men on it. Very rarely would we ever send just a pumper with 4 guys to something in our city that isn't an active fire or a fire alarm. So what you're asking is that when they go to that fire, those 2 are going in the ladder to the same location. Do you understand that?
Yeah, okay. So okay. Okay, then, going back to your budget request, you have here a new fire engine, estimated cost $85,000.
And that's a lease over 10 years, and that was given to me as a number from finance director. The actual cost of a new fire engine is about $750,000. A new ladder, about $1 million. We don't need a new ladder. We have a brand-new ladder. It just happens to be 2002. We just can't use it where it's sitting. So what we've agreed to is, like, the previous administration understood that we needed a new pumper and said, go ahead and spec one out. So we started to do the specifications, and we stayed under the $750,000. But then we approached this new administration before we finalized that, even though we had the green light to make the purchase from the previous administration, and he asked us to hold on that. So we did. We held on it because we understand we're just a cog in the wheel, and we understand that financial responsibility is huge, so, and budgets are tight. So by holding on the new fire truck, before, and just to mention, if you go down the list, you'll see you want a total PPE for 3 new firefighters. Well, before the capital request, I requested 3 new firefighters to bring us up to 33, so that we had 10 men per shift. And the reason why is because, and this goes to that $425,000 budgeted overtime, is that under this current contract, my men can have three of them can be off in any combination of their earned time. But I only have 9 guys per shift. So that means every day that a guy takes vacation, holiday, sick, comp time, there's going to be overtime over at the station because we don't have the manning to support the contract.
Okay. Then we've got on here 15 replacement SCBA air bottles.
Well, that air bottles nowadays, they have shelf
a
life.
shelf
Yeah,
life.
and just like, when you fill it up with 4,500 pounds of compressed air, they swell, believe it or not, microscopically, and they put stress cracks in it, and eventually they won't fill them anymore. They become too dangerous to operate in a hazardous environment. So they're on a replacement thing. We have about, I think, 45 to 50 tanks over there to take to a fire. Sometimes, we try not to do it, but frequently firefighters will use up an entire bottle and have to have another bottle placed on their back to go back into the fire. That's why we need so many bottles, with more bottles ready to go in an emergency. You can change out a bottle in 10 seconds. But some of the bottles, 15 of the bottles are coming due. And so we would like to keep up with that amount in case we need it for a big fire, a warehouse fire or something like that, where we would need, or even at NASA, some of the underground channels at NASA are unbelievably long to get to the fire itself. You could be breathing air for 10 minutes while you're walking to the fire to find the fire. So it's imperative that we have these bottles as a replacement.
Okay, and then the last one with your Scott site.
The thermal imaging cameras, and I told the mayor about this, to enhance our capabilities as firefighters. One of the things that Hollywood doesn't do us justice is they show firemen running around in fires where you can actually see. You can't see a thing. You can't even see your hand in front of your face. And you have to find the fire through thick, acrid smoke. The only thing that works to find the differentials in temperature, victims, and where the seat of the fire is a thermal imaging camera. Currently, they're bulky, usually handheld, or small and on your vest. And we have a couple of those. Scott, who does also our Scott bottles and our breathing apparatus, developed a thermal imaging mask that they wear, and it's part of their mask in their breathing apparatus. It's a heads-up display in their mask, so they can choose to look at it and see the hose lines, see their exits, see victims, and they can look out the normal lens to see if the smoke is clearing, if they're getting a good hit on the fire and that. And for about $40,000, I can put every man in that department in a thermal imaging mask, reducing the possibility of a firefighter death and to quickly find the victim. A couple of years ago, we saved two ladies' lives over on Engle Road, and one of the things that probably slowed their finding those victims immediately was the fact that they were crawling around and bumped into them and dragged them out. Luckily, we were able to resuscitate them, but if they'd have had thermal imaging masks, they would have been able to see them immediately, go right to the victim and grab them and pull them out.
Okay, I just want you to understand, I'm 110% for safety for our men. I'm just coming off of here, okay? And I want you guys to know that I appreciate everything that they've done. And I'm not trying to nitpick or anything like that. I just want to get the facts on this. You know, like I said, safety is the number one objective for all of our safety forces. There's no way in the world I could ever, accept anybody getting hurt. And I just want you to know that it's nothing personal.
Well, we
and I hope you
appreciate
guys
it.
know that.
Oh, we understand that. We
just ask questions. We just got to get questions.
absolutely.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I go to the questions to you, I'd like to ask Greg Single if he could just have these 5 requests on the wish list from our chief. And by the way, thank you for coming. Which ones are on the proposed capital improvement expenditure from this evening? I know the 150,000 is there. I found that one. I don't see anything at 85,000. I see a lease of 172,000. Is that the lease that we're talking about?
No, through the chair to Councilman Salvatore, 150,000 is the amount that's proposed for this year, which would be the Fire Station 9 improvements, plus the copier lease, plus the leases that were entered into in previous years that equal 172,000 and change.
For the fire department?
Correct.
So it's just, so really this list is really condensed only to talk about the station number 9?
Correct.
That's the only thing on it. So there's nothing, all these other 4 items really did zero discussion because the only thing that's here is station number 9, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll limit my questions to station number 9, although I like that last one that you mentioned for 40,000. I really like that idea. But
Me too.
on the $150,000, and you mentioned my name and the mayor's name on that drawing, and I do recall that, and you said it was only 124,000. Now, why it didn't get done then, I can't tell you that, but I do remember supporting it. And on those same lines, I also remember there was a time when there was a proposal to take that same apparatus and park it in the Middleburg Heights Station, and then they would respond to our need for that vehicle in exchange for them being allowed to use it, and they would house it, take care of it, maintain it. What do you think of that idea, or what did you think of that idea at the time?
Well, so the reason why a city has a ladder is to increase their ISO rating. ISO is Insurance Service Organization numbers. By increasing that number, your businesses and homeowners are able to get a better insurance rate on their homeowners insurance and on the insurance for businesses throughout the city. That's why Middleburg has their own ladder. That's why a lot of these cities have their own ladder, because the Insurance Service Organization recognizes that that piece of equipment can throw a whole bunch of water from elevated standpoints for a great defensive attack. They also take into consideration water. They take into consideration manning, dispatch. All things are taken into consideration. But the ladder is one that could drop your rating and increase the amount of money businesses and homeowners pay in their insurance rating. It's a great tool. It's different than a pumper. And at that time, when you were that was during the closure of the West End Station. We could not house all the equipment that we had at that point, and we couldn't man it. So my thought was, and at the time, Middleburg's ladder was faltering, and they weren't going to replace it right away. My thought was, in my communication with the chief of Middleburg, was that, well, we can't staff it. We call you guys to be our ladder anyway, and you need a ladder to protect that hospital, and our ladder's tall enough to reach the hospital's upper decks. Take my ladder. And then later, obviously, I don't want to give my ladder away, but that was the best solution at the time, basically because they were short a ladder and they have that hospital to take care of there. So it was a proposal. And then when we decided, the citizens or whatever decided to keep that station open, there was no need to move that ladder at that point.
Okay, on an average, if you know, in the course of a year, how many times does that vehicle actually go out?
I don't know that. That's one question I don't know. I do know that it goes on all of our commercial alarms. And I know that we have a lot of commercial buildings that have faulty alarm systems that go off in the change of weather and that, so it has gone out a lot. And I know that it goes to other cities for mutual aid. But to give you an exact number, I can't do that right now. If you call my office tomorrow, I'll have it for you.
Well, let me rephrase the question. How many times does it go out, if at all, to house fires?
In our city?
Yes.
Not since I've been chief. Not to a house fire. To a warehouse, that kind of stuff, yes. And Ponderosa, I know because I spent 2 hours in the bucket on Ponderosa in that ladder, so.
Now, when you get a commercial call, does the call automatically go for the mutual aid to respond, not knowing what you're going to be going to? Or do you wait till you get there and then ask for help?
We have parameters in this city. Now, 1710 recommends that they do auto aid on alarm drops, but we don't do that because we realize that our partners to the south and to the west don't have the manpower to support a response automatically on an alarm drop, because 99% of them are false alarms. So we do not require that. What we set is a parameter. So we said, if you get multiple calls, if you have a policeman that sees smoke, if you have a human being that did a pull station, then send auto aid immediately. But if it's just an automated alarm, just send us.
And one final question. If you had to prioritize your list, what would you feel is the most important? Would you rather see the thermal imaging masks or park the ladder truck indoors?
Well, maybe I'm old-fashioned, a fireman. I've been here in this city for 23 years, and I've been in this service for 35 years. It's all that I know. But we have enough thermal imaging cameras, and we've been saving lives all along, and I think it's a nice addition for firefighter safety and to enhance our service, but I would have to go with bumping the doors and bringing that apparatus into service as a frontline vehicle. By the way, our ladder, unlike some ladders in Cleveland, also has a 2,000 gallon a minute pump on it, and it can support pumper operations and relay water from a hydrant down the road to our pumper that's on the scene. Not to mention, early placement of that vehicle at a fire scene gives us best for if the fire turns bad on us and we have to go defensive. If we have that ladder up close and to that fire ground, we can then put out a defensive fire and keep houses in the area safe from catching fire if it goes south.
Now, within that $150,000 request, in the $124,000 several years ago, you talked about other improvements
Right.
besides the door.
Right.
Will there be other improvements within? I know you said it won't be the same, but
Right,
are there some?
I don't know. I have a list here, and like, you know, it breaks down the costs. Some of it will not be able to be, but like glass block was $8,000. Maybe that could go, and masonry work to move the doors up was $24,000. The doors themselves were $21,000. But some of the stuff like the toilet partition and painting, and maybe some of that can be done by our service department if it even needs to be done at this point. But certainly the priority would be, in my judgment, and my advice to the mayor, is to bring that ladder up to frontline use instead of a parade vehicle or a vehicle for everybody else's fire.
And you think by parking it inside, it's going to increase the usage?
Well, by parking it there, instead of having the pumper out there that they use on every fire, they would bring the ladder that has pumper capabilities. So two men can get in it, and a third, like for instance, people ask me, well, how are you going to respond that ladder with a complement of at least 3 guys? But it isn't about the conveyance, it's about when the team assembles on the fire ground. So I send one guy to Berea and a chase vehicle, and the 2 guys there on the ladder, they get there, they're a ladder company. 3 men minimum. 4 men recommended, 3 men minimum. You see what I'm saying? It's not necessarily the conveyance, it's the tool and the men that man that tool. And it isn't anything until it gets on the scene.
Okay, well, thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. I have a question for you, Chief.
Yes,
before we move over. Who are our mutual aid cities with the city of Brook Park?
Our mutual aid cities with, well, there's Middleburg, Berea, Parma Heights, Parma, and it goes, and then that's the first ring. Then there's Brooklyn, there's Olmsted Falls, Olmsted Township, there's Strongsville, North Royalton, and it goes out in rings and layers, depending on the call and what you need. The warehouse that went on, that was on fire in Brooklyn Heights a few years back had 13 ladders pouring in on that warehouse to put it out, and it took over a day to put it out. They had communities from all over and even across the bridge on the east side that filled that box. So our boxes are filled based on the severity of call. So as the OIC gets on the scene and sees that it's a real working fire, we start off with 1 box alarm, and that's ours. Then the next box alarm is everybody, the first layer, and then if it gets worse or a fireman gets trapped, then we sound another alarm, and that brings in a further ring. What we try not to do is completely decimate the city next door. In other words, if Berea only has 6 men and they have to man a truck to come over and help us fight a fire, that leaves them with 3 guys over there. And they could be tied up at our house fire for 6 or 8 hours. So we try not to completely decimate each city as we go. And every mutual aid partner has that in mind as they go for us too.
Okay, do we, in the mutual aid participation, the airport's not involved in that?
The airport is involved in that.
They are involved.
And they also are our biggest foam supplier if we need it.
Okay, so I guess in regards to, in regards to, raising the doors at Station 9, and the use of the ladder over there, you had pointed out, with NASA being the main area over there. Does the airport have direct access into NASA through their gates?
They do not any longer. The FAA prohibits them to cross the runway like they used to. So they have to enter in the normal gate, and it takes them just as long, or actually longer, than our station on the west end, if we're able to gain entrance through the west end. They also, they do have structural firefighting capabilities over there. However, they have a different mandate by the federal government that only limits the amount of people that they can leave that reservation. They have to have those men on that site no matter what. So depending on their daily manning is how many they can commit to help us fight a fire. And currently, they do not have auto aid agreement with us or with NASA to go in on a fire unless we request them. Unless it involves NASA's hangar, then they can cross the field and fight the airplane fire on the ground of the airport itself.
Okay, and then last question, how many fire calls are we averaging in the city of Brook Park, only the city of Brook Park? Do we have a number for that?
I do. I don't, I have it, I have it in every one of these annual reports I give to the administration, and it gives us an average of how many fires we have every year. I don't put how many calls for fire. I put actual fires, from dumpsters, cars, to whatever. So I could actually look the number up.
Actually, you know what, it's perfect if you have just the actual fires.
I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but I can look it up for you, or I can give you a copy of all these, and you can look at them yourself at the end of the end of my presentation.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to the chief. Chief, thanks for coming. The men do a great job. There's no doubt about it. I want to refresh your memory. You had stated to my two colleagues to my left and the right that they were there. If you remember, thank you.
Yeah.
In 214, I was there
Yes,
for
you
3
were. You
days.
were there
Thank you very
early.
much.
Sorry about
Okay.
that.
I couldn't let that get away. So.
Sorry.
Okay, you're fine, thank you. And the men were great, and I did enjoy it. It was a very good, absolutely with the police department also, it was a very good experience, and nothing like what you see
On TV.
on TV, or sitting in the house, or seeing them go down the street, or watching from afar. A couple questions, if I could, Chief.
Sure.
And thanks for clearing that up there.
Sorry about
All right,
that.
on that, on what the council president was talking about between NASA and the airport, the paramedics at the airport, do they serve that same purpose over at NASA, or is it just fire?
The only time the paramedics come to NASA is when we request them.
Okay,
So we'll, if we need to, we would request them for mutual aid, just like we would request them for fire over there. There is no automatic response to NASA with that fire service.
okay, and
We have the whole reservation, yeah.
okay, and on that, the paramedics, they never, you guys don't use them or fire for mutual aid for Brook Park at all, the paramedics?
Oh, no, we have used them. They come, actually, we require, when we have a house fire, depending on which side of town, they'll come with either a pumper or a squad.
Okay, and the chase vehicle that you had mentioned, is that a common thing, or is that something that we just do, just to clarify for the public in general, the
Well-
chase vehicle, because we do all see it going, and,
Yeah, it's a
I know there's a
wonderful
reason
tool.
for it, but,
It's a wonderful tool, and it's something that was, actually, my predecessor brought it, Chief Ramick, and I agreed with him to maximize the efficiency of our response with minimum manpower. So the national standard is that you have 3 paramedics working a very serious call. We don't know what that call is going to be until we get there and evaluate a patient. So we don't know how bad it's going to be until we get there. So by utilizing a chase vehicle, I get 3 men on 85% of all our calls to determine if they're needed. And then that guy will sit there and help them load the patient, start an IV, give medications, stabilize the patient, load the patient in the back of the ambulance, and then that frees that man up to go back in service in that chase vehicle to respond to another emergency or to come back and man our fire apparatus. And by the way, our chase vehicle is decked out. It has all the paramedic gear that you need. So he can respond, even if all men are out and have taken all 3 ambulances out of the city and there's 1 man remaining, the 7th man, he can get into that chase vehicle and he can save a life. And it's happened, documented, where we were all out and it was another, we've had an increase, as you well know, of opioids in our city. It was a young man who wasn't breathing, and our paramedic was able to get there and save that man's life until a mutual aid squad got there to do the transport. It's been an invaluable tool. It's very versatile, and it's been used. It's being used and recently adopted by Middleburg Heights.
Okay, and it did. On my first call, we had a call on Carroll, and there was the 3 in a chase vehicle, and then when we came out with the patient, I said, where'd he go? Well, he's gone. He had another call. It wasn't an OD, but okay. And on that, and one more, if I can, Chief, is when you say as many calls as you guys go, and your staffing. Now, obviously, our population wasn't what it was. I don't want to really get into numbers. I mean, years ago we had many more. But as we go there, do you see the need for the staffing? I mean, you say you need more. You say you need more men, and you applied for that. But with our population kind of a little bit maybe going on, unfortunately, at times, the down ladder than it is going the up, do you still see the need for that? I mean, I guess maybe the calls counter that, as many calls as you're getting more calls.
Right.
Okay.
So I can tell you in these 5 years I pulled that in 2013 we had 2,600 runs that year. In 2017, 2,600 runs, we had 34 men. And in 2017, we had 3,477, almost 3,500 runs last year, and we have 30 men. And so what I'm telling the council, what I've told the mayor, is that in order to staff 2 stations, we're at a tipping point. We cannot go below 7 and handle that kind of call volume without starting to use more mutual aid and more of the other communities to bail us out. Right now, we're holding fast, but to the tune of $420-some thousand in overtime.
Okay. And my last one, and I'm done. The mutual aid, is it more prevalent now in 2018? Let's go back to 2017 than it would have been your early years, 2013, 2014, 2015.
I remember when I was young on the department about 23 years ago, where we would respond, we had a 9-man minimum, a contractual minimum, and occasionally there would be 10 or 11, and we would handle a house fire by ourselves without any help from any other neighbors. So it actually, in my career, I've seen the development, the necessity, and now the everyday use of the mutual aid box alarm system.
Chief, I thank you for coming. Thank you for the work you do and the men do, and I appreciate it. And thanks for remembering me from
Sorry about
214.
that.
You're fine. You're fine. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman.
Mr. Mancini. Mr. Bergio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief Mount, for coming out. You did a great job explaining a lot of the questions that I had and the rest of council also. One of my questions were about the $150,000 for the door, expanding that to, and you answered that. I know we appropriated that some years back. I remember that. It wasn't done, but so you're saying that the cost of what you're asking for now would be covering some of the same things that were requested back then for the 150.
Right. I don't know that for a fact. That was an estimate that I conjured up. I didn't have any professional help on that. And I realized that there were some issues in that original plan that I could cut in order to get those doors expanded. And by the way, having those doors expanded not only would allow us to, it would free up our availability to move some equipment so that currently Mr. Gardner has to store a 1986 backup pumper down at the city garage that we have to drain the pump, and it's very limited in equipment, and its pump capabilities are terrible, but it's still our backup, and there's no place to house it. By moving the ladder out there, we can get rid of that pumper, take the pumper from the West End station and bring it over here, and that would become the backup pumper.
Okay.
And so it would be just better. And then modern firefighting equipment has become bigger, like everything else. They become taller and bigger because you have to have everything on that truck. They're not just pumpers, they're rescue pumpers. They have, they're not just ladders, they're rescue ladders, or they're quints, and they become bigger, bulkier, they carry every imaginable thing on them. And that's just, unfortunately, the wave of the future.
You mentioned that most cities desire to have a ladder truck now because of the insurance and so
That
forth.
does play a role in it.
They would like to. Do most cities have a ladder truck in our area?
Yeah,
Most
most
do.
of them do.
Most do. The other question is, does the airport have a ladder truck?
I believe they have a snorkel. I haven't talked to the new chief there yet. I don't really think that there is a new chief. I think there's an interim chief out there, but I believe they have what's a snorkel, which is not quite a ladder. What it does is it allows you to get an elevated stream, but you can't rescue people like ours can pluck people from balconies. And
Ours would be much superior than that.
Oh, yeah.
So if they have something happen, a fire at NESA or the airport, would we go out there to? We would definitely go out there to help them.
Oh yeah.
And
They would
Cleveland also.
actually come to help us at NASA. We're responsible
that's-
for
that's
that
ours,
whole
right, yeah.
property, not the
Yeah.
airport.
And Cleveland would
Mutual
partake in
aid
mutual
to
aid
us,
too.
correct. We
Okay.
don't have an MOU with them, but they will come if we call them.
Okay, all right. Those are the questions I had. Thank you.
No
so much.
problem.
Thank you, Mr. Bergio. Mr. Poindexter.
Thank you, Council President. Thanks for coming, Chief.
No problem.
My first question, can't you guys just sell calendars, pay for this stuff?
What's that?
Can't you guys sell calendars? You guys sell calendars pretty well, the firefighters.
Oh, not our fire.
No, just bad attempt at humor. Sorry about that.
It's
My first question is there a cost difference to operating the ladder as compared to the pumper? I mean, is it? I assume it's
No, they're comparable.
comparable.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next question. When you go on runs, isn't there like an insurance charge to the customer you go to help or aid? Do you
Currently, we do not charge for fire suppression. It's something that I've not breached the new administration with, charging residents for going to the fire or their insurance for that. There are some avenues for recouping some funds, definitely for hazardous material spills and such. But no, we do not currently bill our citizens or our businesses for fire responses.
And the last one that just came up when you were answering Mr. Bergio's questions, you said so if we do the renovations at Station 9, put the ladder there, we can get rid of the backup pumper.
Yeah, because that pumper that's out there now would come over to the main house and become the backup pumper.
Is there any value, do you think, to that backup pumper? Or?
Maybe $4,000. It's in 1986. That is an old Pierce dash, and maybe somebody could use it in a volunteer department, or people are collectors, and my assistant chief owns a fire truck, so maybe somebody else will buy one.
Okay.
Is he providing mutual aid also?
No, you'll have to ask him. I think it's like a 36 or something.
We're just trying to claw as much money as we can into our
I-
roads program.
I get
so
it. I get it.
$4,000 is
Yep.
we're on our way.
Right. Right.
So, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Councilman Poindexter. Anyone else? Yep.
Well, I want to thank the president and the mayor and the council for inviting me here. It's the first time I've ever been questioned in front of council while I've been chief or assistant chief. And I'll be glad to entertain any questions at any time. Anybody can come by the station, call me up and ask. We have complete transparency over there. And you citizens own the equipment. We just provide the care for it. So anything you need from me, just come and ask.
Thank you, Chief.
No problem.
I move on to economic development. Mr. Adams, you state your name and your work address for everybody.
Good evening, members of council, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the body to speak on the issues that we're dealing with tonight involving economic development. My name is Scott Adams. I reside at 16009 Ashland Drive, Brook Park, Ohio.
Scott, your work address.
Also would be 6161 Engle Road, Brook Park, Ohio.
Thank you. Council floor is open. Mr. Orcutt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Adams, thank you very much for coming here and giving us your time this evening. I did have a few questions here on the sheet that you gave to the mayor, or the mayor provided to us. And the very first line item was professional services for $75,000. What was, the details on that?
Well, the professional services would involve any outside possible use of attorneys, possible use of any engineers or brokers' fees that might be involved with the transaction of business in the Economic Development Department.
Terrific. And another question on that sheet was the construction contracts for $495,000.
Right. The original thought process was when I came into the position in the early days of February, latter days of January approximate, been in the position now 49 days, 40 very eventful, interesting, fun days actually. What we determined to do was see if a sidewalk program was going to be a repeat for this following year. But as council knows, and returning members of council may recall, you did a wonderful job with an extensive sidewalk program last year. So determination was made that that type of project would not be needed this year. So that was foregone at an approximate cost of $495,000.
Okay. And then our current total balance for this year is 600,000?
Well, that would be
Forza.
that would be some encumbered funds involved with that.
Mhm.
The actual balance allocation is $365,000. In that area, $388,500 total.
Perfect. The HMAP program is within that?
It is. Unfortunately, the economic challenges that this council is wrestling with, you're very aware of. Necessary dollars for such programs as the road program. That program has been reduced to $50,000. That would service 10 residents at $5,000 apiece. Just a side note, council, I already have 6 individuals interested in those funds that were brought over from last year. So that's going to be a small program.
If I can
this year.
interrupt,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Adams, we only have what was given to us as your initial. Do you have
Right.
a copy? I mean, I don't even have it anywhere on any of this. Do you have a copy of what has changed that we can follow along with?
Well, it would be on the City of Brook Park 3 years disbursements and appropriations page. I'd be glad to have a copy of this made for you if you'd like. It's inside the budget.
Yeah, because that would give us a comprehensive breakdown that we can follow along with. As you're saying, HMAP has now changed, and we don't have that in front of us.
Right. Well, if I may clarify, the $365,000, it's involved in that amount. Let me give you the I'll give you the copies, and I'll give you the rundown, if that's okay, Mr.
Please.
Chairman. All right. Mr. Chairman, your council clerk or the council clerk will have the copies for you momentarily.
While we're waiting, would you mind answering any other questions that someone may have?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just was wanting to go through some of these line items just because all we've got in front of us was the 600,000.
Right.
So if that breaks everything down that you're gonna be giving us, that'll probably answer all of my questions that I have.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman.
Well, I got a couple of questions while we're
Go
waiting.
ahead, Mr. Salvatore.
On the economic development budget request, in that 600,000, will we find that $75,000 under professional service, or is that out?
That would be included in the final number, as you'll see in a moment, is 388,500. It'll be included in that. It's all broke down for you, sir.
And repair and maintenance, 500, will that be in there?
I believe that was removed. Let me find it here in my notes.
You, dear.
Mr. Chairman, that's page 11 of the three-year disbursements and appropriations. That $500 is not appropriated this year for repair and maintenance.
Thank you, Greg. How about the travel, membership, and education?
3,500 in there.
It is in there?
3,500 is in there, yes.
Okay. And how about the legal advertising?
The $1,500, that was removed.
Tools and minor equipment?
$250, that was removed.
Okay, and then contracts, that must have been reduced then, right?
Yes, sir, to $365,000.
365?
$365.
And then a construction contract for 495.
That has been removed.
Pardon?
That's been removed.
That's been removed.
Right.
About refunds?
Refunds was removed.
That was removed too?
Yes.
So then whoever was gonna get them, they're not getting them. Okay, so now we're talking about $388,500.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, so 20,000, so we're down to $20,000 for professional services.
Yes.
And you're saying that's attorneys, brokers, or engineers?
Well, they could be charged out of that account. Could also be, for instance, if when we begin working on a potential model for sale of certain property in the state, or excuse me, in the city of Brook Park, funds for those drawings could come out of that also. You know, being a professional service, providing a service to the Economic Development Department for
Okay.
use to bring forward to council, to the administration, also working with a possible purchaser.
Okay, and then what is the breakdown of the contracts at 365,000? That's the one thing we don't have. I mean, we're looking for a comprehensive breakdown.
Okay. First would be the senior services, the grass and snow removal services. Grass cutting, snow removal, that would be $200,000. Then you would have the grants in the HMAP program for $160,000. But that number's been reduced by $30,000 with council's action dealing with the business on Brook Park, off of Brook Park Road, Quay, for $30,000, the grant that was just let. That came off the top at $160,000. So that reduced our grants and HMAP program total to $130,000. If you remove, I'm just breaking it down. If you take the $50,000 out of the $130,000, that leaves you $80,000 for grant purposes for retention and expansion of businesses here currently in the city. Then there's the real estate taxes or property tax or real estate parcels that have to be paid. That's $5,000. That round sum then is $365,000.
Thank you. Anyway, Mr. Bergio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, I'm not sure if if we're talking about the professional services, but I think we really need to do some promotion in our city and marketing.
Mhm.
And I know things are kind of tight, but we have so much to offer. I think we sell ourselves short as a city because we have the airport, 15 minutes of downtown, we have access to freeways. Is there any room for marketing and promotion anywhere in this budget that we could do, or do you have plans to do that?
Yes, that's part of what I do on a daily basis, through networking, meeting with other cities, economic development directors. It's part of our networking. Also, we've become involved with the Aerospace Alliance. That has put us in touch with not only the city of Cleveland, but Cuyahoga County, 5 surrounding suburbs, working as a joint task force to bring businesses back to the Space Tech Park area. The mayor has asked me to prepare a lengthy report for council for later in the month. One of the things we're going to learn about is called an opportunity zone. You may remember when then candidate Trump promised to bring back $6 or $7 trillion from overseas. Well, President Trump put it into his new tax bill that was passed in December. And part of the way he's bringing the funds back is through reduced tax or zero tax on capital gains for corporations, banks, or wealthy individuals. He created what are known as opportunity zones. Each governor was challenged to create a number of zones, which will be approved in the next 20 days by the U.S. Department of Treasury. We applied for 2. The state as a whole applied for 790. I'm here to tell you we received 1. Out of the 320 that the governor forwarded, ours is 1. And that encompasses the entire area where the Space Tech Park is, all the way through Fasico, all the way down the west side of Eastland Road. What that'll allow for, and again, we're waiting for the rules. Like a lot of government programs, they give you the idea and then they bring the rules up. But through the research that we've been able to do, the first 5 years, an individual say he wants to invest $1 million of his profits from his corporation into that zone. Say he wants to be involved with developing a building or purchasing property back there that our city currently owns at the west end, and he invests, say, $2 million to buy that property. Then he enlists a commercial builder to put up, say, a 3-story building, office building. At that point, the property now has a valuation of approximately $5 million because of the improvement and the cost of the land. He brings the $2 million in to purchase the land. If he keeps it there for 5 years and then he sells out, he'll owe 5% to the federal government in capital gains tax. If he keeps it there for 10 years, his investment, he'll owe 0. After that 10 years, if he goes to sell the property plus the gain, so now we have a $5 million building on the land, say he sells it, it's fully rented out for $8 million, that $3 million gain that he realizes is tax-free. So one of the research tactics that one of the research reports I read from the Brookings Institute gave a very simple solution to low-income areas. This is all based upon census data. I'll give you the full report in a lot of detail with copies and information for council to review, and we can question it at that point even further. Myself and Executive Assistant Tony D'Amico received the notice on February 20th. They wanted it back by 4 o'clock on February 22nd. We dedicated the next day and a half with the guidance of the mayor to complete that puzzle. We asked for 2 zones. One was the center of our city, Brook Park Road through Holy Cross, all the way through our main retail district. And again, we asked for the west side zone. We didn't get the one in the middle because it didn't have a major impediture next to it, such as an airport. We received that one because of the airport. So what we're looking at is a possibility of $6.1 trillion of new investment take place over the next 24 months in the United States. And we're one of the lucky few in Ohio to have that ability through our opportunity zone. So as information comes to me, again, we just found out the good news last Thursday, and we're waiting for the certification, so it's kind of early to open a gift. But we've opened it, and I'll get all the information I can as it comes available to me to council. So that's one of the programs. I hope that answers some of the question dealing with that side of town.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to receiving that, but I just think that
So So what we're doing, Councilman, as far as promoting the city, it's basically on an individual level at this point, but part of that professional services could be used for that,
Okay,
just for clarification.
okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bergio. Mr. Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Mr. Adam Scott, thank you for coming also. Just a couple things, we can make them real brief. If we could go back to the professional services where Councilman Bergio was on the promoting the city advertisement on that, that's 20,000. Are we doing anything in the aspect of, like, sometimes you'll see, you know, like a Brexville or something advertising a Plain Dealer, or you'll see Parma advertising in there, or a magazine. Are we doing anything like that to promote ourselves and make it quick so we can stick on the budget part? Are we going to do anything like that? Is that our plan to promote our city?
Well, part of what I'm doing, I met today with a representative from BW. She's the dean of the IT department. What I'm looking to do is engage interns to help set up an IT program, both email and social media, on a very low cost end. Use some of those dollars for advertising if necessary. After our hour-long meeting, I'm assured that we're going to be able to put together this program. And we can use it in a lot of different ways, not just for advertising, for economic development, but for informing the public at the same time.
Okay.
So I'll be bringing that project forward.
Okay, great. And that comes out of the 20. If we could go to the contracts real quick, you had mentioned grass and snow at 200. Is that going to be done as it was last year?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, but we're going to vet the applicants a little better. And when I mean applicants, I mean the providers.
Okay, but the
suppliers of
process will be
services.
done.
From my understanding, yes, at this point.
Okay, and on the HMAP, you had said that there's 6, is it potential applicants or people who already have filled?
Upon review and then further review, they're all 6 qualified for it. There was a question on a 7th, but he's getting me some documentation to support his position. He's a 3-time wounded veteran and lives here in our city, and all he just needs to do is provide me some income information, and he should be number 7 in the program.
Okay, and as far as, well, on the grants, is there anything substantial on that?
Yes, we're currently working, as you know, part of the puzzle that council's wrestled with, and I commend you for the hard work you put in on the rec center / administration building. Upon reviewing of the $5.2 million contract, the funds were not available for demolition, which is required under the contract of this building and our city hall. So one of the most unbelievable phone calls I ever had to make was to call and get a quote on knocking down these 2 buildings. I got to tell you, that was a strange feeling to ask those questions. We're gathering the quotes. I'm working with, as I did, as the city did with the Opportunity Zone, tremendous help, and kudos out to Dale Miller, our county councilman, and Armin Budish and his team. They stood tall with us on that. On this project, for an additional, I'm going to ask through the mayor for $200,000 for demo. The hope is we won't use it all, and we'll have additional demo funds available. And we're working on that grant currently. There's other grants that Councilman Mr. Scott brought forward to us that I'm assisting with the police department. They're well ahead on their own, but I've offered my assistance also for the SRO grant. We've received notice from NOACA that $65,000 in energy grant will be coming our way. We're also in line for grants for next year. A lot of the grant programs through the county had to be filed by December 17th.
Right.
Upon review, grant applications for Brook Park, let's just say, were not granted. So at this point, there's storefront monies available. There's beautification funds available. There's roads program funds available. It's not the usual CBDG program. We talked to Ted, I had Ted Carter in my office, the head of development for Cuyahoga County, and his assistant, the economic director for the county, Michael. He explained to me they're not going to do dollar for dollar because, like so many agencies in the United States, they went through cuts. They lost $27 million in Medicare funding. which has to be shifted from other devices, and unfortunately, one of them is the CBDG program. So they're offering assistance in a variety of ways. We're also actively pursuing those ways. At the same token, we're looking to get some crack sealing material, which upon research with Ed Pytek, our engineer, and Randy Gardner, our service director, I find out it's about approximately 30 to 35% of the overall cost of crack sealing. I'm putting in a grant request for $200,000 worth of crack sealing.
How much, could you come back on that? I'm sorry.
200,000. So we're hoping to realize some of that this year. I'm waiting for the Department of Development and, of Public Works to get back to me on if it's available for this year. If it is, our Councilman Dale Miller, who's now the chairman of the Finance Committee, assures me we will get what we asked for. If not, 19's right around the corner and we'll get it then. So those are just some of the local grants we're looking at. We're also working on some outside grants. Ford has a grant, for instance, up to $100,000 for a designated purpose. So we're working along those lines to try to achieve those means.
Okay, that's all I have. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Adams, on these buildings. I mean, I think that goes for all of us, and I know we'll
Right.
get back to the budget, but
Right.
these buildings been here since before we were born, and it's a shame. And
This used to
like
be
this-
the rec center, you
Yeah,
remember?
it used to be a rec center. I'd like to see it a senior center and add a meeting room, but
Right.
I guess we're tight. But I thank you for coming up, and thank you, and I let my other colleagues go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else, Mr. Adams, we're complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council, everybody has this packet in front of them. Do any of you need to have Mr. Hurst come forward, looking at what he has on here? Would you like to have him up here? Guess not. Move past building. Service with Mr. Garner. Mr. Garner,
Yes, sir.
your name and your work address.
Randy Garner at 19065 Holland Road, the Service Department.
Floor is open, gentlemen. All right, let's see. Nobody wants to start, I'll start. I'll ask the first question. You were speaking yesterday regarding the senior bus, and reflecting back on it, you had said the major issue happens to be the lift. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. The floor is rotted out. We've replaced it with panels. Try to get it back into some kind of shape. The lift is just outdated. Can't get parts for it anymore.
Okay, so apparently, I mean, we have one of our mechanics are certified, whether it be through Braun Mobility or one of them, I would assume.
Absolutely. John Pensis has instructed me and told me where we're at on that. Yes.
So my question is, have we reached out and gotten a price on what it would cost to replace the lift itself versus replacing or trying to replace that unit altogether?
I'm not sure if he has. I'm sure he has. I'm not aware of it. The other parts of the vehicle itself is just deteriorated beyond repair.
Okay. That's it for my questions. Anyone else? Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you. I guess I'll direct this question to the Finance Director. Based on the capital improvements that we have here being requested by our Service Director, how many of these are on the proposed capital improvement expenditures? I imagine the leases are pretty solid, but the $320,000, is that for the garbage trucks?
Through the chair to Councilman Salvatore, so yeah, the leases were from previous years. So the rear loader lease and sanitation at $45,000. And also the pump station improvements down in sewers and drains at $100,000 that we talked about, I think it may have been yesterday. And then we had the tractor lease that was entered into last year, that's a 7-year lease. the new rubbish trucks that were purchased. The lease was entered into last year. That's a 7-year lease.
Can you refresh my memory now? Do we own those at the end of the lease, or do they get turned back in?
We do own them.
And how many of those things that made it to the proposed capital improvements are on your wish list to the director? What are the things that we don't have to talk about?
I believe the only thing that was taken off was a salt truck, a dump truck and salt truck combination. It was $165,000, I believe. I rescinded that, and some dollar amounts on some tools and minor equipment, I believe we scaled down.
If I could add, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Salator and other members of council, the plow blades were also included if you move down to the snow, so $20,000 in plow blades. And then also in mechanics, moving up the page a little bit, miscellaneous equipment tools, $10,000 for miscellaneous equipment and tools for the mechanics. So those were also part of the service department wish list that is part of the proposed appropriations.
Okay, and then as far as the $100,000 for the Fry Road pump station, can you explain the function of that pump station? And then what exactly is in disrepair, and is it functional?
It's the three major pumps that are in that facility have been there since 80 or 81, I believe. And they've been rebuilt and worked on, and they too are obsolete. They're being replaced or proposed to be replaced with a bigger horsepower pump, 3 of them, to handle the capacity there and all the supporting equipment that goes with it.
So over the years, they've been repaired and they're functional.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're looking at replacing it. And have you actually got a quote for that? We're gonna
Yes,
use the
sir.
entire 100,000, is that an accurate number?
It was 999, or 99,670, I believe.
Okay.
Right at 100,000, yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. Mr. Bergio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Randy, I'm sure that it's already been assessed, but the bottom of the page for the 2 bodies on the garbage truck to be placed in 2 separate trucks that are rusted and obsolete, does that mean the drivetrain and all that is in good shape and not rusted, or it's worth doing it? And is there a lot of mileage on those vehicles?
Absolutely. The trucks are average 20 years old, though I think one of those was 34 years old.
Oh.
But I believe we chose not to do that if we got a new truck to add to the fleet. So that could be a possibility. I believe they were 160,000 each, if I recall. Or 85,000 total, or 85 for each one, and then 160,000.
So these are new bodies being placed
Hoppers, bodies, yes.
on existing
Frames.
yeah. And so in other words, the frames are in good enough shape, even though the body's rusted
Right.
out?
Yes, sir.
They are? Okay. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Mancini?
Randy, on that 41 and 43, thank you, Council President, through the chair to Randy, real quick. Are them the ones are they the original old ones that were in the 80s, or this is the 41 and 43 that we got maybe back in the early 2000s?
2003.
I know they do rust, and I know they carry a lot of weight, so I imagine they got some wear and tear. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Council President. Thank you for recognizing me.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Garner.
Thank you.
We'll move to Recreation Director, Mr. Elliott.
Good evening, Mr. President.
Where is he? Mark, give us your name and your work address, please.
Mark Elliott, 17400 Holland Road.
That wasn't necessary.
Just in case I'm
Are you trying to drag this
unrecognizable.
meeting out? You want a 4-hour meeting? Is that what you're trying
Yeah.
to do?
I'm trying to set the record. Council floor is open. I guess I'll start this one also. All right, so Mark, your wish list, I mean, obviously we know that the first item, the Kennedy Field improvement has been removed for the $75,000. Let's go down to the community room and the city council kitchen for $15,000. Obviously, I walked through it, and I'm sure most of the members of council have. You know, looking at it, to explain to everybody what you're looking to do. I mean, in here, it says that it wasn't included in the recreation energy project. Therefore, the need to completely renovate the kitchen's necessary. It says especially since many community organizations will be utilizing this area when renting. New counters, cabinets, appliances, and that's all it has on here. But myself being in there and walking in through it with you, and I told you what some of my feelings were. I don't know if you've since looked at it any differently or not.
No, Mr. President, honestly, in all due respect to you, we would agree to disagree. I believe it's very important. There are a number, after talking with the staff and some of the community groups, it certainly is an area that is used a lot. You'll have, especially with it being renovated, I've heard a number of times here with city council members on, how are we promoting our community and all. The room being renovated is certainly automatically going to promote our town, and I think it's going to increase the usage. So, whether it be community groups and organizations, different functions like the beautification event that is, normally done. It won't be this year, but it has in the past, and I'm sure will in the future. Other organizations, the chamber has done different luncheons there. There's always birthday parties or anniversaries, wedding showers, baby showers, et cetera, et cetera. There are people that do come and, have their events catered, but there are also a number of folks that continue to bring food and graduation parties, which I attended one just last year there. They will continue to bring food, and they'll need a kitchen area to help serve and warm food and prepare food. So I think it's really important. Our seniors use it every single Tuesday. And again, you have an area that is completely renovated, offices and the community room, and for that one area not to be renovated, I think would be just bad judgment on our part. So I think it's very important to get it done and to complete that area.
Thank you. So with that, it was mentioned from the finance director, and he can jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the special rec fund of $250 that has over $500,000 in it, and we're looking. It's used for some of the special programs and things like that. Your next item is I'm sorry, 2 items down. I'm going to skip ahead. Is the concession game room area that you want to make renovations to make a game area for the kids. So we've got $15,000 is what you're asking for to make those adjustments. What do you plan to do so that everybody's aware? I mean, you had stated to myself that you're looking to push back or shorten the counter space in there, correct?
Yeah, Mr. President, can I go down the list and address each of these items to help you along, and then I'll explain everything completely. We talked about the kitchen. I would also tell you with that number, I did get a quote from a company, so it's not a number that's inflated at all. It was a quote that I had received. The third item was the front desk renovation or the registration area. That too, when you come into the building, that it's an area that is very weathered and old. needs to be replaced. I think we could be a little, utilize that to the way where we place computers, a work area, and I think we'd be more efficient how we service people up at that part. But again, that was one of the areas that was not included. Recently, there has been a commitment, again with some assistance from Councilman Scott, that they weren't going to include replacing some of the ceiling tiles, but that is going to be updated. We'll have service that will do some of the painting back there, because again, that wasn't included. But those are all the different things that we'll include in that area. In the concession area, / game room area, I've talked to a handful of the council folks who have, we keep talking about increasing and gaining space for the kids in our community, so we are going to try to take advantage of that with the concession area. As you recall, the game room used to be downstairs. Bridges is down there now, and they take up that area. So, that has been somewhat taken from the kids, and we want to take the concession area. The concession itself, the counters are very large. I don't believe that it needs to be that large. And as I've walked all of you through with me, we've talked about that. So we would really reduce the size of that. The service director and I, again, I have gotten a quote from one company, and the service director is getting a price from another company here in town. So we will make that a little smaller, but still serviceable for any event that wants to go in that area. Again, it becomes another area that we can rent, as the community room would also become an area that we can rent. The concession stand area would also, we would be able to increase seating and tables as well. And because of the configuration, it coming out as a 90-degree angle will just kind of be parallel. It'll just go more against the wall. The other half of the room we will use as a game room. And I have talked with my staff to prepare some ideas. I've also met with the library recently and their staff. For instance, they have a Wii and screen and couches over there where, and they've reduced the sound, but what they do is they have a lot of different athletic videos or action that can be taken place, and other mind and educational type games and stuff that can be played. So I was really impressed with that. I thought that would be a great thing. We have a group of old timers who like to go downstairs, and there's still some pool tables downstairs. I'd like to bring those upstairs. So they would be part of that. Some of the old traditional games and some of the more modern-y games. And we have a younger staff who, that's why I'm leaning on them to, we're talking to some of the kids that come down and to see what they would like. So we'll repaint that. We'll move a lot of the concession or the vending machines out of the area that it is. We'll tuck it away in a corner. And again, kind of get that, and again, make that space a little bit larger. And I hope to have the concession and the game room area separated by a gate, which we can lock. And if it's not being used, that way nobody can get into that area. But yeah, we want to give that a facelift, and I think it's something that would be great. It'd be a great option for the kids who come to our building after school. And, for instance, this week it's been spring break in the Brea City school system. And we've put on a program, Danny Colonna and Amanda Morgano have done a great job of, we just called it Spring Break Olympics. And done a great job of every day, daily, doing a lot of team events and relay races and a lot of fun games, and the kids have had a great time with it. And we've utilized almost the whole building. We've used the track upstairs, we've used the gymnasiums, we've used the hallways, we've had just used every imaginable space. It's just another space that we could have had. And again, people participating are a lot of young kids who they haven't seen yet. So I think that's a positive thing. And so it's an area, the game room area, I think is just an area that really needs, in some way, shape, or form, should be there and as an option for them. The next item on there is a movie projector and a screen. And I'm the first look, I've been there. I've been where all of you are, and some things are what is important and what isn't. the biggest three that I feel strongly about is the concession game room area, is the front desk area, and is the community room. Those are areas that I think that we really need to work with. There's an outside group that we are going to deal with this summer who already has volunteered, who has equipment to come and do some movies, and we'll do some outdoor programs with them. But that's something, if we're able to utilize that we would certainly like to do that. But if, that money is taken away, we certainly understand. The CAT controllers, which is item number 6, those are important for the whirlpools and the outdoor water park. So those are things that really are a necessity. Number 7, which was for some of the ballparks, that too is something that we certainly don't need. The last item I had added, it's storage shelving. Again, that's something that will go on what it was the old stage of the community room, but I did, through the Cuyahoga County, I got a lot of shelving donated to us, so we'll need to purchase that. That's something else that can go away. But we've gained some donation and it's new shelving that we can put back there through the county. So I'll entertain any questions that you have, Council.
Thank you. Mr. Stem, your hand was up
Thank you,
first.
Council President. Through the chair to the rec director, with the concession room, is there going to be a reduction in counter space in the game room? And if so, is it possible to recycle that into the new kitchen area and by the community room?
Probably not, because of the size of the counter. We'll see what we can do with that. We're going to try to see if we can salvage that, but we think with the cost, it may not be necessary to save that.
Okay.
Or to utilize that way.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Stem. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the chair, to the recreation director, all the items that you entertained in your presentation, those are all in the budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just start at the bottom of the list and work up. And the portable home run fence, we have one now, correct?
Yeah, no, that was one, Councilman, I just said we don't need.
Well,
to do
that's
that.
coming off.
Correct.
Okay. As far as the game room, now in the old game room, when it was downstairs, we had 5, 6 pool tables down there, correct?
Yeah, there's not that many right now. There's probably 2.
No, but I mean, one was open.
You're going back a ways.
I know, from a long time ago.
I noticed the gray hair, like me too. No, yeah, it's a long time ago. Councilman, we probably only have 2 right now.
And we're gonna
There was a couple foosball tables,
Yeah.
in which we could probably utilize that.
And will that fit in the proposed
Yes.
game room that you're talking now?
Yes.
We'll get 2 pool tables and a foosball game?
Yeah, at least one of the pool tables.
Have 1 pool table? Okay, what would what if we could recapture the space downstairs and put it back where it was originally?
I would ask council, I would like to, I've spoken with the mayor, and I don't think this would be at this public meeting. I would prefer not to address some of those things, and we could talk about that later.
Okay, I'll meet you at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We got a vote tomorrow night.
Well, we just, well,
I
I
understand.
don't think
I'm
that will not change your vote. As a courtesy,
Absolutely.
would be appropriate not to talk about it tonight.
I'm
And
all
I can
about-
talk to you after that.
I'm all about professional courtesy, and
Thank you.
I respect your
Very good.
request.
And I'll explain that.
And I'll drop that question. Let's see, what was the other one I had here? The kitchen. I agree with you. I mean, the kitchen was its original. I mean, obviously, we want to be proud of anything that we put, any product we have out there. We want people to feel good about that they're having their event there. Have we explored any possibilities of doing some of this work, or even all that whole kitchen in-house? Doing it through our service department, buying our own cabinets at a discount at one of our local places right on Brook Park Road?
We will do that. I've gone as far as when I spoke with a couple of the companies, a lot of times there are those that are maybe demos, but it's nice, it's never been used, but it's been used in a demonstration type situation. If it's something that looks great for us and we can get it at a reduced price, we certainly will do that. I will be very conscious of trying to do that as well as we can and with cost in mind. I would certainly share that. If we can use our people in that way. We're getting to a busy season for the service director, and I know everybody talks about manpower. We've heard both chiefs come tonight and talk about manpower. Manpower is certainly is important with the service department. So with all due respect to their time, if we can utilize them, we would certainly consider that. If not, then we'll, stay within those dollars that we must.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Bergio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, I don't think that is out of line for the kitchen, $15,000 renovation. You mentioned that it's new counters, cabinets, and appliances. Is there anything else with that, like maybe flooring or the walls or maybe ceiling, anything else that's going to be renovated or updated besides that?
They'll be repainted and they will be retiled. The tile, those are things that we can do. My staff can do that.
I think it's worthwhile because that's something that's visible too, and it's used a lot too. So I think that's not out of line when you get new appliances and so forth. The movie projector and screen. Do you know approximately how many times we use that movie projector in a
In
year?
the course of the summer, we've used it about 3 times. We have borrowed it from a couple cities and a church. So I would tell you probably 5 or 6 times in the summer. It can be used more throughout the year. We've used it only in the summer. It is something that can be used year-round within the building. But, so we could increase that number, Councilman. But right now, about half a dozen.
Yeah, I'm trying to weigh out if it's a need or a want, and try to assess if that is, worth it, or how much the rental fees for those things are. But you said sometimes we actually just borrow them too.
Right, I certainly understand that.
Yeah. And the other thing, the shelving, good job in finding shelving donated too. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mark, one last question regarding the projector. Obviously, we know that the renovations taking place in the community room are gonna include, I believe, new. I don't know whether it's gonna be. Is there gonna be a projector screen in?
They're in the new council? Yeah, there will be video screens on the, right behind you on the wall.
Okay, so that'll be able to be utilized maybe to offset that also?
No,
I
this
know
is-
some of this stuff was for the outside one, the blow-up one.
Correct.
I attended
This
a
is-
couple of them last year.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what this is, Councilman.
And that's purely what this one is for? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Orcutt?
Yes, just checking with you, Mr. Chairman. Was your question answered about that fund balance 250, special recreation fund?
No, it was not.
To the through the chair to the rec director, can that fund balance, can we use that money towards these renovations? Actually, I think it would be through
I would defer to the finance director.
Mr. Work, could you repeat the question, please?
Could the total revenue in fund balance 250, could some of that money be used for the upgrades?
So the monies that go into, they're accounted for in Fund 250, the special rec fund, those come from the programs. So any expenditure, I'm thinking that actually this movie projector probably could be expensed out of Fund 250. Because it would be a program, movies for the kids. I don't know if we would charge for it, but if we would charge for it, those dollars would go into Fund 250. So anything equipment related that would relate to a program can be expensed out of Fund 250, not the building renovations.
Thank you very much. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Orcutt. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, thank you to Mr. Elliott and for Mr. Single for weighing in on that. Gentlemen, that concludes all of our department heads at the moment. Floor is still open. If we have anything else, questions for the mayor, anything, anyone?
I gotta find the number, hold on.
I'm sorry.
Hold on one second.
Mr. Scott's gonna have a question first.
Yeah, fund, real quick, Greg, through the chair to Greg. What about, can we, pull them 3 items from the rec department, item 2, 3, and 4? Can that come out of, general, 401-700, line 700? Government building and lands and buildings?
So that would be the, through the chair to Councilman Scott, that would be the community room kitchen, the front desk registration, and the game room equipment. I would say the first 2 items could come out of 700.
I'm just
The
looking for.
community room, kitchen, and the front desk registration. But again, remember, we have a large roads program,
I know.
2019, $2.3 million. That's the city's obligation. So the thought was to be conservative in our expenditures this year with the hopes to be able to carry forward monies next year to limit the borrowing that may be needed in 2019. And then, moving into the community center, there still may be some other items that need to be addressed once we get in there. And those dollars in the line 700 would be utilized as part of the update to the community center.
Continue.
And Greg, again, the vestibule yesterday, the 110, that's coming out of 401-700, correct?
Through the chair, Councilman Scott, that is correct.
That's it.
Greg, one question on that. So we've already reduced 401-700 by $110,000, so we're down to 278 in that, correct? In that fund?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you. Through the chair to Finance Director. Greg, what is the total expenditure then for recreation?
Page 14 of the 3-year disbursement and appropriation, about 67,000, a little bit more than 67,000.
57 or 60?
67.
67,000. Okay, using that number of 67,000, can that 67,000 be drawn from the Fund 250?
Again, for Fund 250, I would say out of the proposal, the game room equipment would be able to be expensed out of Fund 250. And also I would say the movie projector and screen would be able to be expensed out of 250.
So out of that 67,000, how much can we move from there?
So my understanding is the movie projector is not in the proposed appropriation, so whatever the cost is for the game room equipment, so it's part of the 15,000. If it's the whole 15,000 or a portion of the 15,000, there are improvements also within there. So the maximum will be 15,000.
How about the kitchen?
Again, that's an improvement to the building that would not be expensed out of Fund 250.
Yeah, but kids are gonna be using it.
Again, it's an improvement to the building, so it would not be expensed out of Fund 250.
But if we wanted to put the projector in there, we could take it from that fund?
Through the chair, Councilman Salvatore, we could, expense the movie projector in Fund 250, yes.
And if you wanted to put the portable fence in, could we take it from that fund?
Portable fence, I would say, yes, could be included as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else. Ordinance number 11017-2018 has had its second reading. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr.
So
Chairman,
made, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Salvatore?
before we adjourn, I just want to take a minute and thank everybody for their patience through this, a long process. We're doing it in a short time, and we have to keep in mind this has to be passed by tomorrow. So I would highly recommend it if you had any other things you want to ask, be ready for tomorrow night, and we'll get it out so we can get this budget passed tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. I'll entertain that motion to adjourn. Nobody made the motion.
Yeah, they did.
I'll make that motion.
Motion to adjourn properly supported. Michelle, please call the roll. Jimmy made-
Yes.
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 Stem,
Yes.
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 Yes. It's okay, I know where, we're good, we're good.
This meeting is adjourned at 10:35. Thank you, everyone. Please go home and get some rest for tomorrow. 7 p.m. tomorrow.